friends. This is Jesse with Blue Caribbean Properties, and I'm so thrilled to have John Davis joining me today on my talk of why the Dominican Republic is the veterans' paradise. And just to give you guys, if you don't know John Davis, no, you should look at his Instagram page. That's how I found him, with all the plethora of information of moving abroad. And just to do a little intro to John, and you can always add to this as well. We are talking about you were in the Army, you were in combat, you were a squad leader, you grew up in Iowa, and we were talking I'm imagining country boy, US guy, right? And then you go into the military, you now then get out of the military, go to college, just have been doing all of these really cool, amazing things. And you actually teach, and you went back to Harvard, got your graduate degree, and you're teaching English, you're doing all these amazing things. And now you're living the dream in the DR. I absolutely love it. And not to mention, you also talk to Congress. I'm going to throw that in there while it's on the top of my head. So you do all of these fantastic things. And so is that a good intro? Is that kind of?
That sounds good. We can cut it there. That sounds like what I should make my Tinder profile here in the Dominican Republic. Hey, we can all see those great things. But yeah, I think, joining the military and moving abroad aren't that different of things, because they're both kind of big decisions and stepping into the unknown. And we're seeing more and more veterans want to live outside the United States. A lot of people don't really know, but over 10 million Americans live outside the United States. There's over a million Americans alone in Mexico, and it's becoming more and more of an attractive option. So I started talking about living abroad, and it kind of shocked me how many people were thirsty for this information, how many people really wanted to know if that was possible. And a lot of Americans just don't consider moving abroad because, we got the American dream. We're America. We're the country people move to, not the country that people move from. But like the rising cost of living is making more and more people think that a higher quality life at half the cost might be outside the United States. And I ended up in the Dominican Republic, which I got the Dominican flag here behind me, which I think is one of the best places in the world for veterans, and the best place really for anyone, to be honest.
I've been there obviously several times. I agree with you 100%. But before we get into all of that, can you just let's back up a little bit, because I feel like we have this energy. We're super excited. We want to go right into the stuff, but let's pull it back a little bit. And so you go from Iowa to the military, and now you're an award-winning author as well, which I did not mention. Also add that to your Tinder profile. Award-winning author, for veterans, right? Like a guide for veterans of moving abroad. How did you even start this, right? What was the drive that you had to even move abroad and then also write a book about it?
Yeah, I started getting into veteran advocacy initially with student veterans, because I went from dropping out of community college before I joined the Army to having a master's degree from Harvard on the other side. And the college experience is something that a lot of veterans do struggle with. And the reality of life is, people with college degrees make more money. People with college degrees tend to get divorced less. People with college degrees are homeless less. People with college degrees even kill themselves less. So I viewed getting more veterans into college as something that would be a big impact, that would have a lasting impact in the veteran community. So when I went to talk to Congress, my initial book, I have it here, Combat to College, is a guide for veterans on how to be successful from the transition from the military into higher education. So that was kind of my first initial foray into veteran advocacy. And the living abroad stuff, I kind of just stumbled upon because I happen to live abroad, because I'm a no wife, no kids, no pets, no problems type of guy. So living abroad for me makes sense on my fixed military pension. Obviously, here in the Dominican Republic, I can have a far higher quality of life than I can other places. So I started kind of talking about living abroad as a joke initially. I'd send videos to my friends, I'm on the beach in the Dominican Republic. My rent is $500 a month. And, there we go. And then people were like, wait, you really live there? And then I started getting into it. I started connecting with other veterans here. And here in Dominican Republic, like we say, it's one of the best countries for veterans. And we have over 20,000 American veterans that live here. We have veteran clinics to treat you here. Also, one reason why the Dominican Republic is actually a few reasons why the Dominican Republic is a paradise for veterans is because Dominican values and military values are actually kind of aligned with one another. Dominican people are fiercely patriotic. Dominican people have a community-driven culture. You know, here in Dominican Republic, people invite me over their house. People go out and they're more community-driven. Whereas in America, we're kind of more individualistic in what we do. So Dominican people are also very religious, and a lot of veterans as well tend to be more religious than the civilian population. And then you have the kind of other things that are great about Dominican Republic, the beautiful weather, the lower cost of living, great beaches. Also, Dominican people love to party. I like to party. Other veterans like to party. So it's kind of like a great culture for people to come into. One of the best things about the country, however, is just how welcoming the people are here. A lot of the country is based around tourism, so they tend to be very like friendly and welcoming to people from all over the world.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100% on that as well. Now, I will say though, what I love about your videos that you do on Instagram that I've seen is that, you're painting this beautiful picture of the Dominican Republic, which I agree with you 100%. But you do talk about like you have lived in other places and being in the military, you have struggled with PTSD and you've struggled with, alcoholism and things like that in the past, right? And you're very open about it, which I absolutely love about it. And in medications that you were on and all that kind of stuff to like help with those things. And then, you know, how has your life changed now? Are you still on these medications? Are you still struggling with PTSD? Is that still stuff that you deal with, even in paradise?
A lot of that stuff doesn't necessarily ever go away. But one thing that I've discovered, and a lot of other veterans who moved abroad have discovered as well, is how important your environment is in regard to your mental health. Like plants, veterans, people, you can't necessarily grow in toxicity. And I realized, when I was living in New York City, coming from Iowa originally, how unhealthy cities are for veterans. You are devoid of nature. You constantly have noise. In American cities, you kind of have to be on edge too. Like you can't just take the subway in New York City and be relaxed like you would here on the beach in the Dominican Republic. So when I came here, it was like kind of opening my eyes to a brand new world to where I didn't have that day-to-day anxiety. And then you get into other healing factors. Like for me, the ocean is a huge deal. I mean, there's a reason why people who live closer to the ocean report being healthier and happier in pretty much every category of their life, because there's a calming effect about being near the water. Here, I go scuba diving once a week, things like that. I can go hiking in the jungle to beautiful waterfalls. I can hang out on the beach. I'm not as stuck in an endless to-do list like a lot of Americans live their lives. Here, my life is more based around the things that I want to do, about the passions that I want to pursue. And for me, I work on my computer and I have my military retirement. So all those factors kind of coincide to make the Dominican Republic and living abroad a good fit for me. So it's not necessarily a good fit for every veteran, because obviously your problems tend to follow you no matter where you go. If you struggle with things like alcoholism in the United States, here, nobody even looks twice at you if you're drinking a beer at 9 in the morning. Whereas back home in Iowa, people might, look at you like, hey. But so those things, yeah, like, so those things are a little bit different, when you come place like this, but the veteran discipline that we have makes us good candidates to live abroad. We know how to take care of ourselves. I mean, the first country I lived abroad in before I went to Thailand, before I traveled the world, before I ended up in Dominican Republic, it was Afghanistan, where people were literally shooting at me and trying to kill me. So I know how to take care of myself. I know kind of the basics of personal security. I'm interested in things like helping veterans. Hey, this is your financial security. This is your personal security. This is, how you travel safely and things like that. So I started viewing travel and living abroad as a form of therapy that could be explored. And I think that you have different considerations when you move abroad when it comes to mental health. Like you have problems with isolation, maybe if you're a veteran moving abroad, to where you might tend to self isolate a little bit more. And that's why here, Dominican Republic, places like Thailand, the Philippines, we do have veteran organizations, veteran clinics to kind of create that community for veterans. And in my free guide for veterans moving abroad, I do have a comprehensive section on mental health abroad, how to take care of yourself, how to develop a routine, and all those things. Because, like I mentioned earlier, there's no necessarily running away from your problems, but sometimes when you create an appropriate amount of space is when you can really heal. And there's other things in the United States too that I think are worth mentioning, like the political division that can create kind of a toxic environment for the entire country that kind of leaves somewhat of a stress that just kind of floats in the air. Whereas here in the Dominican Republic and other countries, there's more social cohesion, we'll say, to where like people in the Dominican Republic are legit not screaming at each other about wars in the Middle East. They're not screaming at each other about, the same things in the United States that Americans might be concerned about. If I was to tell like a Dominican person today, like, hey, what do you think about the war in the Middle East? Did you know there's a war going on there? They would be like, isn't there always a war in the Middle East? And I'd be like, yeah, I guess there kind of is, so it's just a different kind of thought process, and escaping from kind of like that political toxicity that we've created for ourselves in the United States has been really healthy for me personally. And the veterans that come here, I encourage them and advise them, hey, leave your American kind of BS at customs. You come here and you embrace the culture, you give back, and you leave that kind of nonsense, is what I'll call it, behind.
Okay. That's fantastic, because
that was kind of a long answer, but
well, no, I think that's great, because you're right, especially this right now we're going. I mean, I'm getting so many text messages on a daily right now because of the political debates and everything going on. And not to get into the politics, what viewpoint I have or whatnot, but there are people that I just can't speak to, and some are family members, right? Because of this. And it's such a thing. And it's like, I don't know, like it's a very hard topic. It's a very, everybody's very on edge about it, and how the country, what's going to happen with the country. And, then it goes into, interest rates. And I mean, I understand that why that is, but in the same sense, like, it shouldn't be dividing families, I feel like. And it should be something we could be able to talk about openly and have debates on, and then, have a beer or have dinner or whatever, or go to Target afterwards and be like, all right, well, we're over that. I see your viewpoint. Let's respect each other and then move on. Right.
And only when you kind of separate yourself from that can you look back and see how toxic and unhealthy it is. And I've written an article on my blog and talked about how I believe the political toxicity and the division is actually extremely hard on veterans in particular, because we're people that have put kind of the blood, sweat, and tears into creating the country. We've, for me, for example, my friends, I've spent years going back and forth to Middle East, and then you come back to kind of a country at war with itself. And that can be really disheartening. So a lot of veterans are kind of looking at it and just feeling, I'll say, betrayed and kind of disappointed by the whole process. So I do think that is one reason why a lot of veterans move abroad. And when I talk to veterans, every veteran kind of has a living abroad origin story, but it all kind of starts with the same thing. And that's, I was sick of the bullshit. And that bullshit can be 101 different things. But one thing it kind of comes down to is, I was sick of just feeling like politics were that important in my life, when really, is it, so coming here to the Dominican Republic, the only thing I see from politics are like what I see on my phone, and it kind of looks like a reality show. So when you separate yourself from it, you're not as ingrained in it, and I think that being informed, as I'll do air quotes here, being informed isn't necessarily the end all be all, because I'm not sure how much that helps you.
Now, I will say a lot of veterans struggle with, going to the VA, right? Like, it's such a long wait to get in. The medications take forever to get to you. I mean, it seems like it's a big ordeal, right? But a lot of people don't have, their personal health insurance, and so they have to go to the VA for whatever healthcare needs that they need. What is and see what that's like in the U.S., right? Because my brother is a veteran; he was also in the Army. Seeing what that's like for him here, how does it differ? Because I would think like when then you're telling me, oh, are you saying I go to a third world country and it's easier, right?
That's basically exactly what I'm saying, and that's exactly what you kind of discover when you move abroad. And there's other things that kind of are important for both mental and physical health when you move abroad, aside from kind of the generalized healthcare. One of the things here is here in Dominican Republic, I spend my life outside. Americans tend to spend 90% of their time indoors, and we tend to spend our military careers outside as well. So the Dominican people and veterans that live here tend to be outside a lot more, and this results in a healthier lifestyle. The food here is not the ultra processed food that there is in America. I remember when I came here and I discovered that the Fruit Loop ingredients here are different than the Fruit Loop ingredients in the United States. And when you kind of discover that little thing, it kind of opens your eyes to a whole different world. And I started looking at things like the Coca-Cola that we drink here is different than a Coca-Cola that you're drinking in the United States. The Coca-Cola here is made with like real cane sugar, and the Coca-Cola in the States is made with corn syrup, which is far more unhealthy. And that's one reason why America leads the world in chronic diseases, is because not only is information we're consuming toxic, but a lot of the food we're consuming as well. So there's a lot of things about coming abroad before you even get to the healthcare portion of it that really can create a healthier atmosphere. For me, I started sleeping through the night a lot more. I used to struggle a lot with PTSD, especially when I first came back from my second deployment to Afghanistan. And here, it's just the change in environment resulted in a change in my mental health and a change in my life. Here in Dominican Republic, when we get down to the healthcare aspect of it, we have clinics that operate through the foreign medical program of the VA. This is how the Veterans Administration in the United States pays for the health care of veterans, retired veterans like myself, outside of the country. This works differently in different countries, so I'll focus on kind of how it works in Dominican Republic because that's what we're talking about today. But in Dominican Republic, veterans here can get their service-connected health care at no out-of-pocket costs. So that means if I want to go to the veteran clinic and there's one within walking distance of my house, I can go there and get seen today. There are certain rules within the foreign medical program that are different from the United States. For example, the foreign medical program will not pay for dental. So if I want dental here abroad, I have to go to a dentist here in Dominican Republic. But obviously the benefit of that is I can get my teeth cleaned or whatever for like $20 because we don't have the crazy markups and things like that the United States has. So when you do have to do things outside of the clinics, it tends to be a lot cheaper. So if I want, which I don't have any insurance other than the insurance that the Veterans Administration provides me here in Dominican Republic. But if I do want insurance, and a lot of veterans with families or with spouses or whatever do, the insurance here is incredibly cheap compared to the United States for very great healthcare. So you can get like a year's worth of what I'll call, the top tier insurance here in Dominican Republic for like $1,000-$1,200 a year. So you can have that without necessarily being too worried about your healthcare. And healthcare is the first thing that people should think about when they move abroad. What's going to happen if something happens? There is one thing I do tell people, and I do kind of have to press to people, is there's no reason to think that you would be in more of a risk of a health hazard abroad than you necessarily would in the United States. I think a lot of people think that if they come abroad, it's somehow more of a dangerous world, but you're obviously no more likely to have like a serious health concern in Dominican Republic than in the United States. And I'd argue for a lot of reasons, you're actually less likely to have chronic conditions, and things like that. Because I talk to veterans who come to Dominican Republic and they're on something like blood pressure medication for years. And then they come here and their anxiety decreases and they no longer need that medication. For me, I was on different antidepressants. I was on sleeping medication. I was on migraine medication and a lot of these things. And then when I came here, I stopped necessarily needing those day-to-day medications as much. I didn't need to, because I wasn't dealing with the same stressors. It was entirely different. So when it comes to healthcare, moving abroad, I do have a pretty complex, or pretty comprehensive section in my free guide to moving abroad that describes healthcare abroad and also gets into some of the insurance in different places. But the healthcare in Dominican Republic is very good for expats, and English speaking doctors are also very easy to find. In my guide, I also have like links like English speaking doctors abroad, so you can kind of find that, because that's one thing that you're probably going to want. Is my Spanish is okay, but when it comes to if I want to see a doctor, I might want to make sure I know what the hell we're talking about.
Well, that is true. That is true. And that is a good point. So like you said, your Spanish is okay. You just went to Spain. You're practicing. Now, how long have you been living in DR?
A little over 3 years, but I still travel a lot. So like if I go do like a month in Thailand, then I kind of lose most of my Spanish. But I tell people, the best way for me to learn Spanish is just date Dominican girls and argue with them, and you'll pick it up. That's
Yeah.
the best advice
You're
anyone
gonna
can
pick it
give
up
you,
that way,
because
yes.
you're gonna want to understand what she's yelling at you about or whatever, and argue back or whatnot. So, and I think that a lot of people, one issue that expats have when they come to Dominican Republic is they think it's either like perfect fluency or nothing. When in reality, you can develop a level of fluency that enables you to get by just fine without necessarily being perfectly fluent. Like if a bunch of Dominicans are talking and they get really excited, I'm probably not going to be able to track full conversation. But kind of one-on-one, when my brain has time to process it, I'm going to be good. And now there's so many technology options as well with like Google Translate and things like that, that it makes learning a new language even easier, because most language is really not that complicated. I think a lot of people overcomplicate the idea of learning another language and think that, oh, I'm too old or I'm not capable of it. But if you learn, we'll say 100 phrases, you're going to be able to get by in everyday life just fine. And that's kind of what it is. Like, I don't need to be good enough at Spanish to be like, I don't need to write political philosophy in Spanish or something. I just have to be able to communicate with like doing my laundry, with going to the grocery store, with going to restaurants, going to the gym, getting to know people, going out. Like, I don't need to be as good at Spanish as necessarily other people might think that you might need to be to move abroad. And a lot of people let the idea of language acquisition hold them back from moving abroad, when obviously in reality, the best way to learn language is just to go there and learn it.
Well, and I think it's a topic because a lot of people fear the unknown, right?
Mhm.
But then on top of that, they're saying, okay, how am I going to go to another country? Because people wouldn't even vacation sometimes in other countries, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
many people go to the DR and they just stay at the hotel resort, right? Because there's that whole thought of like the fear of what's going to happen if I step foot off this hotel, like ground,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't help necessarily that you have these like military guys that are, with these big guns and walking around and, so I mean, you have this presence of like, what's happening here? Like, we
Yeah.
don't see that in the US. Now, not to say that in the US, a lot more people have guns and they're walking around. You can't even see them, right?
Yeah.
They're concealed and stuff. So, but, talking about the fact that, safety, I think people think because if I can speak the language, at least it's and
Mhm.
some wrong that you're a little bit more safe because you understand what's going around you. But you're saying, didn't really speak Spanish. I'm living the life here. People are welcoming. Have you ever felt unsafe when I mean, granted, you are a military guy. I'm sure you could take people down and stuff, and they're not going to mess with you, So, I mean, maybe I'm not talking to the right person on this topic,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think that, because I do talk to like female veterans about going abroad and to, have travel tips for them, things like that. Obviously, it's a little different as a single guy traveling than it would be for a single female. And there's different kind of things to follow. For example, in the United States, girls know not to take drinks from strangers, but guys really don't. So you might see a guy in Colombia get like drugged by someone because he's not used to something like that. So there's different concerns when it comes to, kind of moving abroad. And a lot of the concerns are not necessarily what I'll call like violence related. They're more like scam related as when it comes to moving and living abroad, because violence in the United States, when the issues with our country, is that it can be incredibly random. It can be a school shooting, it can be at a mall, you can get carjacked. It's crimes like that can occur essentially at any moment in any corner of the country. Whereas crimes abroad are usually kind of more for a more specific reason. So a lot of the veterans that do get in trouble abroad, or I'll say everyday Americans, are putting themselves in positions they would not put themselves in the United States. If you're in Mexico or wherever in the world, or in the Dominican Republic, and you're going to buy cocaine in a bad neighborhood at 3 a.m, obviously these are the types of behaviors that can get you in a little bit of trouble. So these are the things that, I talk about when it comes to moving to the Dominican Republic. Is obviously, just like in America and Dominican Republic, there's some areas that I just like wouldn't go in because I wouldn't have a reason to. Like there's no, I live in a very safe beach community, and here in Dominican Republic, one of the safety benefits is we do have the politur here, which is what we call like the tourist police. So these are specific police officers and units and an entire division that's dedicated to keeping foreigners and tourists safe. So you see a lot of them in the more touristy areas like Punta Cana. There's a ton of politur around, and it's incredibly safe compared to any United States major city. Here where I live on the North Shore, we also have them as well. So these are people that are there to keep you safe, keep you out of trouble. And that's a huge benefit for people coming here, because there's less, like anytime a tourist dies abroad in Dominican Republic or Mexico or whatever, it makes kind of like front page news. Whereas Americans die every day in the United States and everyone's like, So it's something that people kind of blow out of proportion. And when it comes to the Dominican Republic, I am from Iowa, spoke no Spanish at all when I came here. And in over 3 years of living here, I've never had an issue at all when it comes to my personal safety. Of course, I am a guy, and I have had things like, taxis trying to rip me off, but that's just kind of a part of life. And there is kind of the gringo tax here, which I get into my guide about how, people are obviously going to quote me a higher price when it comes to things, or try and take advantage of me financially, because they can look at me and see that I'm here and I probably have more money than like your average local Dominican.
So you do this tour, you go to college, you're sitting, it seems like you're sitting pretty, in terms of being able to retire well and whatnot. So why not, I guess people are gonna ask, why not Florida? Why not Texas? Why not why not somewhere in the US?
I'm an adventurous person. I love adventure. I love travel. I think travel is a form of therapy. Like I have an article on my blog about travel therapy. And that's why I think so many veterans are moving abroad, because we are more adventurous people. I do want to live a life that I'll look back on and remember and have great experiences and do all the things that could be possibly on my bucket list. So one reason why I'm here opposed to Florida is obviously the cost of living. My apartment is within walking distance of 2 gorgeous beaches, and I couldn't afford that in Florida, to be honest. I mean, I'm a writer, I'm on my military retirement, and I'm not selling, as many books as Stephen King. We'll say that. So, it's one of those things where, and that's why more and more people on fixed pensions are electing to move outside the United States. And I talk to people every day on social media or on email. And if you're watching this and you're interested in understanding the real cost of living abroad, I'd say look at my Veterans Guide to Moving Abroad, but which has information that applies to basically everyone. It's geared towards veterans, so some of the information on there is specific towards the veteran community when it comes to healthcare and kind of mentality and things like that. But I was surprised when I started talking about the moving abroad process and living abroad, how many single females, how many families, how many people kind of outside of what I would think were very interested in moving abroad. When I first started kind of creating the online stuff for fun, I thought it would mainly kind of be single guys, just because that's who seems to be the type of people who would be interested in moving abroad. But I've talked to so many females, so many families who are thriving abroad, escaping kind of some of the toxicity that we've discussed in the United States. But it's, you know, everything's about the money. I mean, we can live in the real world and be like, it's financially dependent. And I do want, like a lot of people should want to live the highest quality life possible at the lowest cost. And that's kind of impossible in major American cities. Here, I'm able to live a life, you know, I'll say kind of my dreams. I have a small 1-bedroom apartment for $500 a month, walking distance of restaurants, beaches, gyms, bars, everywhere I want to go. I have a maid come, I have someone come get my laundry. And these are kind of things that I couldn't afford in the United States, but I can afford here.
You have a maid?
Yeah. You know, she comes in, cleans once a week or twice a week, whenever, you know. So and those are kind of luxuries that I think that a lot of people in the United States aren't accustomed to. You know,
No.
it's incredible. I mean, here you can, like, I can afford to go out to eat all the time. Whereas in the United States, I mean, you go to Applebee's, it's going to run you like $80 with, you know, a meal, some drinks or whatever. But abroad, it's a different story. And that is the same when it comes to real estate, for example. You can buy a beautiful beachfront condo or whatever in the Dominican Republic or Mexico, wherever else, at an affordable price. Whereas that's kind of impossible in the United States. For my mother, you know, she's 67. Her generation's dream was to retire and go to Florida and buy a nice condo on the beach and kind of like hang out for the rest of their lives or whatever. But for middle class, everyday Americans, that kind of American dream has been put out of financial reach for a ton of people. And I think if we're being honest with one another, when I look at younger generations or older generations or whatever, the American dream isn't exactly what it used to be. And a lot of people, you know, sometimes I get kind of angry messages or comments on social media about abandoning the country and stuff. And a lot of people you hear say, love it or leave it. I think you can love it and still leave it. I love what the military in America has provided for me. I had lived with like a deep sense of gratitude here in the Dominican Republic, because you do see what, you know, any American will call, I'll say, like extreme poverty. But I also saw those things in my military travels in Afghanistan and things like that. So I am extremely grateful for my life here and what the opportunities in America and the military have provided for me. Because in the military, I was able to buy my first house. They paid for my, you know, paid for me to go to Harvard, and that ain't cheap. So is everything that I've, I'll say, achieved has because I was born in America, which is an incredibly lucky thing for anyone to, an incredibly lucky place for anyone to be born.
Yeah. I mean, we're extremely lucky, and we definitely take it for granted. The sense of even the access of our passports, right? Like when you're talking about a person that's from the Dominican and trying to get into other countries, the roles that they have to do to try to like exit the country with visas and whatnot. So, I mean, we are truly blessed with the aspect of like our passports and being able to like come and go for many
And even
countries.
speaking English, because, you know, you can come to the Dominican Republic. I know plenty of veterans, and I tell people to learn Spanish or try to learn Spanish or whatever. But there are plenty of veterans here that speak zero Spanish, like, and they get by because Dominicans, especially in kind of expat and tourist areas, speak English, or at least enough English to get by. But it is why a lot of veterans are like, I'll go like the Philippines because everyone there speaks English. But there's a high level of English fluency everywhere in the world, to where Americans are kind of the only people who speak one language. But anywhere you go in the world, like, people are going to speak English.
Definitely. I mean, I just had it where I was in France, and I just had one person look at me bad, but I was really surprised, like going through the McDonald's line. I was like, oh my God, I went through the wrong line, and I went through the app line. So anyway, I find myself in front of the window with the person, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't speak French. How do I do this? Like, I like almost had a panic attack, and I'm like, merci beaucoup. Like, I don't even know what that meant, right?
Right. You're saying something.
Yeah, I'm like,
And French people are known
English?
for being rude.
No, but they
I
were so
mean,
nice.
oh
They were
yeah,
so
okay.
nice. And like even getting gas and things like that, everything was in English and in French. And,
Yeah.
you know, so I mean, it definitely is. We are very blessed, again, with the language and the fact that people in other countries want to learn English. So I
Mhm.
think we're set up pretty well, you know, being English speaking, to be able to go abroad, definitely,
Yeah.
then
I want to
maybe.
practice my Spanish with Dominicans here, and they want to practice their English with me. And I'm like, no, let's talk in Spanish. And they want to talk in English. So it's kind of funny. And one of the great things about living here is how truly friendly, the people are.
Exactly. Well, hey, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know that you're, like you said, you got these 2 beaches that are by you that, like life, it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sure you want to get to that, but just some advice that you would, for somebody that's wanting to move abroad, what are some of the first steps that you would recommend that they do to get themselves kind of in place to make that happen?
I would say first thing, you're not crazy for wanting to move abroad. A lot of people are going to talk you out of it. A lot of people are going to have negative opinions of the idea of it, and it's something that if it feels right, you're going to kind of know that it feels right. And anyone moving abroad, the first thing that you want to do is do a trial run. So I recommend never move to some place sight unseen, not know what's going on. So if you're coming here to the Dominican Republic, for example, I'll help veterans. Okay, I'll help you get an apartment for 30 days. You pay for an apartment for 30 days and you kind of do a trial run of what it would be like to live here. So things like that are extremely important when it comes to the living abroad process. But if you're thinking about it, then you've already kind of gotten halfway there. The logistics of moving abroad are a lot simpler than I think people understand, and especially places like the Dominican Republic, which actually are attractive options for foreigners because of the ease of moving here compared to other places. When I was living in Thailand, for example, every 60 days I had to leave the country and then come back in. So you don't have to do those types of things in the Dominican Republic. They do make it as easy can be for coming here, which is one reason why so many people come here for even half the year. A lot of people will buy a condo or rent an apartment and just live half the year here and then half the year in the United States or Canada or wherever the hell they're from. So when it comes to moving abroad, there's certain small things that I think are important to think about when kind of confronting the idea of it. And one of those things is the importance of a trial run. And I do get into the kind of steps of do a trial run and other things that are important to consider when it comes to your banking, when it comes to your taxes, when it comes to kind of all those nitpick little things that you have to think about in my free guide to moving abroad.
Awesome.
Which you can find on my website on johnhdaviswriter.com, or I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and all that jazz.
I love it. I'm also going to put it down here when we post this with your information, how you can find John Davis with all the wealth of information that he has. I love this conversation, John. We've spoken. We're going to get together and do some other topics in regards to moving abroad and what that looks like for veterans. But for right now, John, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. I love always having conversations with you. You have a wealth of knowledge, and guys, do yourself a favor, follow him on all of these platforms, and definitely download that free guide that he has for moving abroad. All right. Until next time.